The bell tolls low across the valley once, twice, 3 times, muffled by mist and the soft hush of falling ash. You step into the chapel's cold breath, where the scent of beeswax and damp stone clings to your cloak. Death is not a visitor. Here it is a tenant, constant, familiar, sometimes feared, sometimes welcomed. A black-cloaked monk scrapes Latin prayers into the dark, while beside him, a mother grips the lifeless fingers of her child, lips pressed to a brow still warm. Outside, the world trudges on, grain to harvest, fields to sow, graves to dig. In the Middle Ages, you did not escape death. You lived beside it. You broke bread with it. And sometimes, you spoke to it. If this journey into forgotten grief and sacred ritual stirs something in you, tell me, how would you have mourned when death rang through your village like a church bell? The frost crept into the thatched eaves before the light ever touched the rooftops. A pale mist lingered low over the earth, clinging to boots, to fur-lined hems, to the aching breath of beasts in their stalls. Somewhere just beyond the stillness, the chapel bell groaned into motion. One more toll, then another, then silence. You knew, as they all did, what it meant. Not for harvest, not for fire, a soul had passed through the veil. You step out into the morning. The sky is a dull pewter lid, thick with cold. Even the birds do not stir. Beneath your boots, the soil is hard as sorrow. A hush has fallen over the village, not the silence of peace, but of reverence. The death of a child, they say. A boy with hair like oat husks and a cough that clung for weeks. You did not know him well, but you knew his mother. Everyone did. If stories like this help you drift into sleep or stir your quiet thoughts, consider subscribing and tell me in the comments, how do you think you would mourn if mourning was part of everyday life? You cross the lane slowly, the cold nipping at your knuckles. Smoke rises from low chimneys, curling into sky like unanswered prayers. The chapel is just ahead. Stone walls softened with moss and lichen, its small round window aglow with candlelight. You push open the wooden door. It creaks like an old memory dot inside. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and damp wool. The pews are empty but not abandoned. You step into the stillness and see her, a woman wrapped in dark wool, shoulders hunched, fingers trembling as she draws a cloth over her boy's tiny frame. Her name is Mirwin, once a midwife, now a washer of the dead. She has done this more times than she will ever count. With hands worn and reverent, she begins the ritual. You watch as warm water is poured into a basin of pewter, steam rising, like a soul just freed. She dips a linen cloth and begins to wash him gently, as if the skin might tear, though the boy has already gone where pain no longer dwells. The water darkens with the dust of life. Mirwin does not speak. She hums. A low, threadbare lullaby meant more for herself than the child. Outside, others begin to gather. Not many, just those nearby, those able to leave their tasks. A woman in a cloak worn thin by 1,000 winters. A crooked-backed man with hands like bark and eyes like hollow wells. They do not speak either. Grief in this place is not performative. It is known, worn like a second skin. Mirwin wraps the child in a shroud of coarse linen, binding his arms gently at his sides. Over his chest, she lays a carved wooden cross, smoothed by generations of sorrow. You notice how her lips move with prayer, but no sound escapes. Her voice has long been given to the dead. The boy's mother is not here. Some say she collapsed when he stopped breathing. Others say she walked into the woods and has not returned. No one judges her. There are no right paths through mourning, only dark woods and the occasional flicker of a lantern. You turn your gaze upward. The chapel roof arches like the ribs of some ancient beast, its timbers blackened by years of candle smoke and whispered confession. High in a stone niche, a wooden virgin stares down with empty eyes, her child forever in her arms. She too knows what it is to lose. A priest arrives, Father Aldwin, stooped in weather-stained robes, patched with care. He dips his thumb into a small vessel and makes the sign of the cross upon the boy's forehead. Dust to dust, he murmurs, the words more breath than sound. He lights a taper and places it at the boy's feet. May angels lead thee into paradise. You find yourself holding your breath. As the final candle is lit, the bell tolls once. More outside. It is answered by the soft clang of pots stilled in homes, of boots pausing mid-step, of mothers clutching children just a little closer. Death, here, is not hidden behind walls or veiled in polite denial. It is part of the rhythm. It walks the village path like a neighbor, slips into beds unannounced, shares bread at the table of the old and the young, and when it takes, the village answers not with fear, but with ritual, small gestures carved into the bones of generations. Mirwin closes the boy's eyes, though they were already closed. She smooths his hair. She has done this too many times, yet her hands do not grow careless. She places a sprig of yarrow on his chest for protection. Some say for memory, others believe. Outside, a cart waits. Not ornate, just a wooden plank and two wheels, pulled by a grey mare whose eyes mirror the weight of every funeral she's known. The shroud is lifted, the child placed gently. No words are said. Words have little power now, and yet your heart speaks them. All the same, in your chest, the ache is not just for the boy. It is for the world that must keep going, for the father who sharpens his scythe without weeping, for the sister too small to understand, for the old washer who walks home alone, humming lullabies to a silence that does not answer. Evening draws its veil across the village. Smoke rises once more, candles flicker behind shuttered windows, and in the chapel the wax still drips, slow. As time, the tolling has begun. The morning after the death feels like a page turned, but not yet read. The sky above you is bruised with clouds, the kind that hang low and slow, as though mourning too. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak, the fabric stiff with frost at the edges, and begin the quiet walk toward the chapel. Beneath your boots, the ground is not yet thawed, and each step crackles like bones beneath the soil. The bell tolls again, a slow, iron hum that drifts through the fields and between cottages. It is not merely a sound here, it is a summons. A reminder, a promise that the dead will be carried home, not by angels, but by calloused hands and grieving hearts. The small procession gathers just beyond the chapel doors. There is no music save for the wind pushing through the bare branches. A boy clutches a candle too large for his hand. A woman holds a woolen cloth to her mouth, trembling against the chill. Father Aldwin stands at the head of the bier, his voice already low with prayer, his shoulders bowed beneath the weight of duty. The child's body is there, wrapped tight in its linen shell, the wood of the makeshift coffin darkened by yesterday's rain. There is no coffin lid, only a covering of cloth, a few dried herbs tucked beneath. A few coins have been laid atop the chest, not for payment, but for hope that the soul might pass safely, that the body might rest undisturbed. You find your place among the mourners. The mare snorts once, pawing the earth. And then, slowly, the cart begins to move. The path to the graveyard winds through the village like a scar, worn by centuries of grief. As you walk, you pass cottages that do not open their doors, not out of disrespect, but out of reverence. It is not proper to gaze too long at another's mourning. Grief, here, is a private pilgrimage walked in public. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, a mix of frozen clods and old straw. At one bend, a child tosses a handful of withered petals toward the cart, a gesture learned, not invented. Even the youngest know what must be done. You pass the old oak, the one struck by lightning years ago, split but never felled. It leans now, as if in silent prayer, bark riddled with lichen and age. Mirwin walks just behind the cart, her steps slow and even. She wears no veil, no jewels, only a belt of rosary beads, worn smooth from use. In one hand, she carries a small vial of holy water. In the other, nothing, as if holding space for the dead she has loved. The graveyard sits on a low rise just beyond the village, flanked by crumbling stones and yew trees that whisper when the wind cuts through. It is not vast, it is not grand, but it is filled, not just with the dead, but with the memory of their passing. Every stone is a name, every patch of unmarked earth a story once told and now forgotten. The grave has already been dug, a shallow bed of churned soil and frost, dark and yawning. Beside it stands a man with arms like branches and a face carved by wind and labor. The gravedigger, his name is Tam. You've seen him drink in the tavern, heard his rough laugh. But today he is quiet, reverent. He does not speak as the cart arrives. Father Aldwin begins the liturgy. Requiem aeternam dona es, Domini. His Latin is rough in the throat, cracked with age. The others join softly. The chant carries, not with grandeur, but with familiarity, as if every voice remembers how to say goodbye. As the prayers fade, Tam steps forward. He lifts the boy's body with surprising gentleness and lowers it into the grave. A soundless pause follows, long and wide. Then Mirwin steps forward and sprinkles the water, murmuring words too old to trace. A woman beside you drops a pinch of earth onto the shroud. It scatters like ash dot. A low wind begins to moan through the stones. The mourners shift. A few cross themselves. A child begins to cry, not loudly, but with the honest sorrow of someone too young to pretend otherwise. His mother pulls him close, whispering comforts meant more for herself than for him. And then Tam speaks, his voice rough and deep. A soul not mourned walks still, he says. But this one walks no longer. The others nod, some kneel, some stand, some weep. No one leaves too quickly. You wander to the edge of the graveyard as the last handfuls of soil are thrown. A raven watches from a nearby branch, feathers puffed against the cold. Beyond the stones, the village smoke rises once more, and the day resumes. But here, for just a while longer, time bends. Here, you are allowed to linger. You walk among the graves, your fingers brushing the lichen-covered markers. Many bear no names, only carvings to warn to read. One stone bears only a circle, another a crude cross. The dead here were not all rich, but they were all remembered, at least once. Tam joins you as you pass the far wall. They say, he begins, that a soul forgotten to long grows restless, that it knocks on doors at night, that it walks, looking for someone to call its name. He glances toward the child's grave. That one won't wander. Not yet, anyhow. You nod. The wind pulls at your cloak. Behind you, the others begin to drift away, their steps slow, their voices hushed. The graveyard is quiet once more, and beneath the earth, the child sleeps. The cart is gone. The grave is filled. The earth has been pressed firm with boots and solemn hands, and still the day stretches on, grey, cold, reluctant to end. But the village must return to motion, however gently. Bells have tolled, prayers have risen, and now grief takes its place beside hunger. You follow the slow procession of villagers back through the muddied lane, where the smell of smoke thickens and the sky hangs low like damp wool. The doors of the longhouse open one by one, not in celebration but in shelter. You duck beneath the threshold of Meerwind's hearth, where the fire has been coaxed back to life and the walls breathe warmth into frozen bones. Inside, the room is dim and close. Rafters cradle bundles of dried herbs, and the table is already set with simple things: black bread, boiled barley, a pot of leek broth that steams faintly in the hearth's embrace. The air smells of earth, onion, and smoke, the scent of morning shared. You take your place among the others. No one speaks right away. The silence is soft, not heavy, not absence, but reverence. In a corner, a woman kneads dough with eyes swollen from tears. Her hands do not pause. Her grief has no words, only motion. A ladle is passed from hand to hand, each portion small and careful. There is not enough for abundance, but no one will go without. You receive your bowl, warm, salted, humble, and feel its comfort settle. In your palms, around the table, faces are dimly lit by candlelight. Wax puddles along the edge of the wooden slab. Shadows flicker like old memories. Soul cakes appear dense, round offerings baked in haste this morning. Each is marked with a cross, brushed with honey, and meant to be eaten slowly with remembrance. You bite into yours. It tastes of nutmeg and flour, of tradition carried on weary shoulders. An older man raises his cup of dark ale to the boy. He murmurs, voice cracked from disuse. The room joins him in silence. No clinking, no laughter, just the tilt of mugs and the shared breath of grief. The drink is bitter, but it warms. Beside you, a father sits with both hands wrapped around his bowl, though he does not eat. His beard is untrimmed, his cloak unfastened. His son was not the one who died, and yet something in his face says otherwise. He stares into the broth, as if it might tell him how to explain the weight in his chest to the child sleeping at home. You glance toward the hearth. There, seated close to the flames, are 3 elder women, sisters perhaps, or simply friends forged by winters and burials alike. One hums a prayer under her breath. Another twirls her spoon without lifting it. The third tells a story in the low rhythm of those who remember, of a winter harsher than this, of children buried under snow, of a feast shared with no bread and still full of grace. Their words drift like smoke, not heavy, not clinging, but present. You realize they have done this 100 times before, 1,000. Their voices are the thread that binds the living to the dead, the present to the past. A girl no more than 9 slides onto the bench beside you, eyes wide. Did the boy go to heaven? She asks, her voice feather thin. You don't. Answer, you don't need to. An elder nearby rests her hand gently on the girl's back. If the saints do their duty, she whispers, he's already there, chasing angels barefoot through fields of yarrow. A moment later, The girl is chewing her soul cake again, content enough. The door opens once more, and a gust of cold breathes through the room. A man steps in, shoulders dusted with snow. He carries a jug of watered wine, and no one asks where he got it. He pours a little into each cup and sits beside the others as though he's always belonged. In morning, even strangers become kin. A basket is passed, small scraps of dried apple, a lump of cheese wrapped in old cloth. No one takes more than a bite. Each offering feels sacred, too precious to hoard. The act of eating together is the true meal. You look around the table again. You see grief in many forms, in the silence of men too tired to speak, in the way a mother feeds her child first, in the cracked lips that do not quite touch the rim of their cups. And yet, in all of it, there is dignity. There is community. One man begins a low chant, not a hymn, but a folk song, old and cracked and weary. Oh, the wind knows the names of the sleeping, and the trees weep where none can see. The melody rises like a mist from the fields. Soon others join in, quiet, faltering, until it becomes a murmuring river of memory. You sing too, not for the boy you barely knew, but for every name etched in your heart, and for the ones you have forgotten. The flames dance higher in the hearth, and the room exhales. The worst has passed. The ritual has been kept. The dead have been honored. The living, for now, endure tomorrow. Fields will call. Livestock will need feeding. Children will squabble and laugh again. But tonight, the world holds its breath, wrapped in the scent of broth and beeswax. In this warm, flickering silence, death does not reign. It is only present, and presence here is sacred. There is silence, and then there is the silence that follows too many deaths, the kind that clings to rafters and settles in the folds of wool, the kind that hollows out laughter, silences birds, stills the bark of dogs. In that year, the year the Black Death came, the bells rang until their ropes frayed to nothing. Then they stopped ringing altogether. You remember the first cough. It came from a tanner's boy, just 15, who had brought hides from a neighboring village. He was flushed and tired, with sweat soaking his collar in the dead of winter. By nightfall, he was fevered. By morning, he was dead. His mother screamed, but only once. At first, the villagers whispered prayers and lit extra candles. Milwyn visited the house with her pouch of dried herbs, her hands shaking as she wiped the boy's face. The priest brought holy water and muttered verses over the threshold. But the next day, another child fell ill, then an old man, then a farmer and his 2 sons, and then the world fell quiet. You walk through the village weeks later, and every door seems either sealed or open to rot. Smoke no longer curls from chimneys. Chickens wander freely. The silence is not peaceful, it is watchful. It hums beneath your skin. Mirwin still moves among the sick, though her face is veiled with linen soaked in vinegar, and her eyes no longer linger on the dying. She does not speak much now. You follow her through a cottage with low beams and stiff bodies. A woman lies beside her child, both wrapped in the same woolen blanket. Their lips are tinged blue. Their hands still touch. Father Aldwin is thinner now. His eyes are bruised with sleeplessness. You find him kneeling in the church, with a list of names so long it trails onto the floor. He writes them in ink that runs when the tears come. He tries to bury them all, but the graves have grown shallow. Too many, too fast. Tam, the gravedigger, has begun stacking bodies in the ossuary crypt. He no longer speaks. Outside, a cart creaks by, wheels dragging through the slush. On it lie 5 corpses, wrapped in rough linen, limbs twisted by fever. A boy follows behind, face slack with shock, guiding the donkey with hands too small for death. He cannot be more than 10. No one stops him. No one has the strength. You help load bodies into a pit beyond the village, where wild grasses have been flattened by too many feet. There are no crosses here, no prayers, just earth and a sky that never seems to clear. The smell clings to you, rot and damp, blood and ash. You try not to breathe. In the evenings, those few who remain huddle in silence. Fires are kept small. Doors are barred. Children are shushed even when they do not speak. Some believe the plague is punishment. Others say it is the devil's breath or the stars misaligned. One woman claims she saw death walking the fields, robes black as pitch, eyes burning like coals. You believe her, and yet there is still kindness. A friar from the nearby monastery walks into the village one morning, robes flapping like torn sails. His name is Brother Thomas. You meet him outside the chapel, where he kneels beside a dying girl and presses his fingers to her brow. You are not alone, he whispers, though no one is there to hear it but you. You watch him for days. He brings broth to the fevered, reads psalms to the breathless, digs graves when Tam can no longer stand. His hands are cracked and raw, his voice hoarse from weeping. When Merwin collapses from exhaustion, it is he who carries her inside. But compassion cannot outpace the plague. Brother Tomas begins to cough, first lightly, then deeply. He hides it at first, covering his mouth in the chapel shadows. You find him one evening beside the altar, face pale, lips bitten red. He looks at you with calm, unshaken eyes. "I prayed to live," he says, voice thin, "but more than that, I prayed to be useful." He does not ask you to stay, but you do. That night, he lies on a straw pallet, hands folded over his chest. Merwin sits beside him, humming the same lullaby she sang weeks ago, the one for the boy. Her voice is cracked, tuneless, but steady. You watch the friar's breath slow. When it stops, the room is silent. And then, only then, does the bell ring again. You ring it yourself. In the days that follow, there are fewer deaths. The air begins to clear. The coughs grow less frequent. No one dares say it aloud, but something has shifted. The sickness has passed, or perhaps it has merely moved on. Still, the village is changed. Doors remain empty. Fields lie fallow. The graveyard swells. But in the chapel, Father Aldwin begins to recite the Mass once more. His voice is soft, unsure, but it carries. You sit alone in the pew, watching wax drip slowly down the sides of the candles. For all that has been lost, this flame remains. The Black Death came like a wave, swallowing all it touched. But even in its darkest tide, there were hands that reached out, names that were spoken, prayers that were whispered, and now, beneath a frost-bitten sky, you exhale. The breath does not fog. The manor stands on the far edge of the village, cloaked in ivy and years. Its towers are squat and grey, not grand but sturdy, a place where the seasons pass slowly, where servants step lightly, and where rooms remember. You are summoned before dawn, the frost still whispering across the fields, the crows not yet stirring. Word has spread. The lady is dying. Inside, the air smells of beeswax and withering lavender, of stone, warmed by firelight, and sheets, long untouched by sleep. You step softly across worn flagstones, following the flicker of a taper held by a page with red-rimmed eyes. The hallways echo with silence, thick and waiting. No weeping, no panic, only the rhythm of footsteps and the weight of what is near. You enter the chamber slowly. It is warm here, unnaturally so. The hearth blazes bright and candles burn in clusters along the walls. The windows have been shuttered against the cold and the watching night. A priest sits at her bedside, lips moving in quiet Latin, hands holding a crucifix darkened by the oils of 100 other deaths. The lady lies still, her face ashen, lips parted just enough to whisper. She is not young, she is not old, but her body has softened into that final stillness, when the soul seems to be gathering itself for the journey around her. A tapestry of presence. Her eldest daughter holds her hand, rosary slipping between her fingers like falling beads of rain. A boy, her son, perhaps, kneels at the foot of the bed, fingers clenched, mouth pressed shut in the effort not to cry. A nursemaid stands in the corner, unmoving, her eyes already red. And there you are, watching as death stretches its hand across the room. Outside, the first light begins to stir, but it does not yet reach this chamber. Time bends here. It is not measured by bells or sun, but by breath, each one shallower than the last. You take your place near the fire, beside Mirwin, who has come not as washer, but as witness. She has seen this before. She will see it. Again, the priest leans closer, murmuring the act of contrition. Domini, Isu, Christ. He anoints her brow with oil, his thumb trembling ever so slightly. Her daughter leans in, whispering something you do not hear. Her voice breaks midway, and she buries her face in the folds of the bed. The lady's eyes flutter open, just once. Her gaze moves slowly, as if through water, and rests on the boy kneeling at her feet. A breath, the softest curve of her lips. And then, with a sigh so gentle it might have been the wind, she is gone. A silence falls, deep and sacred. No gasp, no scream, just the slow extinguishing of presence, like the fading of a candle untouched by wind. Then, a small gesture. The priest nods to a servant, who unlatches the window. The chill rushes in, brushing across the lady's face, lifting a strand of her greying hair. The soul must be given room to leave, they say. The air must be allowed to carry it. The open window is a gate. You glance at the others. The daughter kneels now, her forehead resting against her mother's hand. The boy turns away, pressing his face into his sleeves. Mirwin steps forward and closes the lady's eyes with 2 fingers. Not a task, but a benediction. The priest recites the commendation of the soul. His voice is soft, but firm. Depart, O Christian soul, out of this world, in the name of God, the Father Almighty, who created thee. The words carry into the beams, into the stone, into the quiet. They settle into the room like snow. You find yourself mouthing them, though you do not know when you learned them. Servants begin to move, not with haste, but with reverence. Water is fetched, linens are brought. The daughter stands, pale but composed, and begins the quiet task of laying her mother to rest. She smooths the sheets. She removes her mother's rings. She brushes back the hair with slow, practiced fingers. This is not her first vigil. You help close the shutters once more. The light that enters does not belong here. The chamber has become a sacred space, and daylight would only shatter its hush. Candles are trimmed. The fire is stirred. The nursemaid brings in a sprig of rosemary and lays it near the bed, for remembrance. Always for remembrance. Later, as the hours slip past, the family gathers in the hall below. The priest remains behind, watching the body with a gaze that sees more than flesh. You stay, two seated near the fire, listening to the way the room breathes, no longer with the rhythm of life, but with something gentler. Resignation, reflection. You think of all the other rooms like this, scattered across the countryside, of all the windows thrown open, all the final words whispered, all the souls released into air that does not answer. Death, when it comes like this, slow, expected, surrounded by warmth and prayer, is not cruel. It is a closing dot, and so you watch. The fire burns low, the oil lamps flicker, the wind outside hums through the stones. The vigil is kept. The wind rises early that evening, curling its long fingers beneath shutters and through the mossy cracks in stone. Inside the alehouse, the fire crackles low, licking at a blackened pot that swings gently from the hearth's iron arm. You sit on a stool near the flame, its warmth licking your boots, your fingers curled around a mug of weak ale gone lukewarm. Outside, the trees groan and the night holds its breath. But within these walls, the dead begin to stir, not in body, but in story. A woman speaks first. Her voice is rough with age and smoke, but there is gravity in her tone. "It came back to me," she says, setting her mug down with a hollow thud. 2 winters after he was buried, stood at the foot of my bed, eyes gone white, face pale. As tallow, I could smell the river on him. Others nod slowly. No one laughs. In this place, you do not mock the dead. A man with a scarred cheek speaks next. "My cousin saw one too," he murmurs, "after he buried his brother without rites. Couldn't find a priest in time. Said he heard knocking, not at the door, but from beneath the floor, every night for a fortnight." He taps his fingers softly on the table. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The rhythm of unrest. The room shifts subtly. Shadows grow longer. The fire pops. Somewhere behind you, someone mutters a prayer into their cup. You've heard these tales since you were small. Revenants, they're called. The unquiet dead. The ones who come back, not to bless, but to warn, or punish, or remember. They appear in fields, in doorways, in dreams that feel more real than waking. And always they are missing. Something, a proper burial, a final word. A prayer whispered too late. You sip your drink slowly, letting the warmth settle in your throat. An elder named Elric leans forward, his hands splayed like roots across the table. His eyes gleam with firelight. "There was one," he says, "in Dunford, south of here. A soldier who died on the road. No coin for the ferryman, no stone too. Mark him. Folks say he came back a year to the day, black with rot and silence. Just stood by the well until someone lit a candle and said his name. The silence that follows is heavy, not with fear, but with knowing. You've all seen too much to dismiss such things." Mirwin sits nearby, silent. She does not offer a tale. She has no need to. Her hands carry stories enough. You glance at her, and she nods once, slowly. A confirmation, a warning, a quiet agreement with what hangs unspoken in the room. The fire snaps again, spitting a curl of ash into the air. A gust pushes at the door. No one moves to open it. Then someone, a youth, eyes still soft, with the luxury of disbelief, dares to ask, but what makes them rise? Elric answers, not with impatience, but with patience worn smooth by repetition. "Unfinished things," he says. "A debt, a betrayal, a secret unspoken. Or sometimes, they simply weren't mourned. The living forget, and the dead remember." You close your eyes for a moment. You see again the boy in the shroud, the graves too shallow, the names left unsaid. You wonder who walks because of it. The conversation turns softer then, as if spoken too loud it might draw something nearer. Stories pass like coals in a fire, shared, tended, watched. A tale of a drowned wife who calls from the well. A soldier seen on the road at dusk, always heading home but never arriving. A child whose laughter echoes in an empty barn. Superstition, some might say. But here, the line between faith and fear is not so clear. Outside, the wind howls once more. A shutter slams. The candle nearest you flickers hard before righting itself. You reach to steady it, then hesitate. Better to let it burn undisturbed. Merwin finally speaks, her voice dry as leaves. They come for remembrance, she says. That's all, to be seen, to be named. And then she turns her gaze to the hearth, to the flames that rise and fall like breath. We all come back, in one way or another. You watch her hands as she speaks, worn, lined, but steady. Hands that have prepared bodies, sewn shrouds, held the cooling palms of the newly departed. If ghosts seek her, perhaps it is because she is one of the few left who will still speak to them. The fire burns lower, the room dims. Outside, the stars have appeared cold, clear, watching. One by one, the villagers rise, muttering blessings as they pull on cloaks, hoods, gloves. You leave with them, the wind biting your cheeks, the night wide and dark. But as you walk the lane toward your home, you do not look back. Not tonight. You wake to the sound of a bell, not a tolling one, but the soft ring of iron against stone. Morning hangs low and colorless, the sky the hue of soaked wool. The alley is narrow where you walk, pressed between leaning timber buildings and slanted roofs that drip from the previous night's thaw. The cobbles are slick with ash and old broth. Somewhere nearby, a rat scurries behind a broken bucket, but no one flinches. The town's main street bustles faintly, but here, in this forgotten sliver of the world, time does not move forward, it lingers. And this morning, it lingers in death. You find her slumped beside the threshold of a boarded tavern, a bundle of limbs wrapped in a cloak too thin for this chill. Her hair matted with cold sweat, one slipper missing. She was old, perhaps, or perhaps simply worn by the road and the hunger. There's a crust of bread in her palm, unbitten, her fingers frozen shut around it. She has no name here, just the look of someone who used to be a daughter, perhaps once a sister, now just one of many who drift from doorstep to doorstep hoping for warmth. The baker's boy found her. He said nothing, simply lit a candle and placed it on the stone. Beside her, as his mother had taught him. You kneel beside her. The breath is gone, but the body is still soft. She has not been dead long. There is no family to call, no priest rushing to her side. No morning bell will ring for her. In this part of town, death is not uncommon, only uncelebrated. But then, the small iron bell rings again. You glance up. Set into the wall of the adjacent church is a single, narrow window, no larger than a loaf of bread. Behind it, stone, mortar, silence, and then a voice dotted as faint, reedy, but unmistakable Heckying Eternum. Donna A. Domini. The words float down like dust through a shaft of forgotten sunlight. You rise slowly and step closer. The bell rings once more, not loud, but steady. A pattern meant for the ears of God, not man. This is the anchorite's cell, you realize. The woman who chose a life bricked inside, sealed from the world, save for that tiny window. She is still alive in there, still listening, still watching. For a moment, you forget the cold. The anchorite's prayers continue, Latin phrases drawn out like silk threads. Not hurried, not rote, but rich, spoken as if this death were the only one she'd known. She cannot see the body, and yet she mourns it. You lay the cloak back over the woman's chest and brush a strand of hair from her brow. No one should leave the world unseen, and today she has been seen. A few villagers pass by. They glance, but do not stop. Some nod, others look away. But the candle stays lit, the prayer continues, and the alley feels less abandoned. From behind the wall, the anchorite's voice shifts. Now she sings. A chant, high and wavering, echoes through the stone. Not beautiful in tone, but full of intent. You close your eyes and let it wash over. The alley. In this place, too poor for altars, the voice becomes sanctuary. A man walks by with a bucket of water, and when he sees you, he hesitates. Then, without a word, he pours a trickle into a bowl and sets it near the woman's feet. A gesture, a remembrance, a kind of communion. Later, when the sun rises higher, you return with win. She comes not with ceremony, but with care. Together, you wrap the woman's limbs, straighten her dress, and carry her to the back of the chapel grounds. There, near the hedge, where the earth is softer, a shallow grave is dug. No one asks who she was. That is not the question. The only one that matters now is, who will bear witness? You do. You place her body in the earth. You speak no Latin, no sacred liturgy, only a few words of your own. I saw you, and then, as the earth is covered, the bell rings once more from the cell above. A soft clang, steady, marking the passage from one world into another. That night, you return to the alley. The candle has burned low, its wax a soft pool on the stone, but the air feels changed, not lighter, not warmer, but seen. The pauper is gone, but she did not go alone. You wake before dawn, drawn by the call of a different kind of silence, not the hush of mourning or the weight of loss, but the cloistered stillness of waiting. The monastery sits at the edge of the woods, where the trees thin and the stone rises from the earth like bone. Its walls are thick and moss-lined, the iron hinges of its door groaning like tired limbs as you push your way inside. Here, death is not an interruption. It is a discipline. You walk slowly through the cloister walk, your boots echoing on flagstones worn smooth by centuries of prayer. Candles gutter in narrow windows, and the air smells of ink, smoke, and damp wool. Every sound a footfall, a breath, a whisper of robes carries like a psalm. You pass monks in brown habits, their heads bowed, their fingers curled in silent rosary. They do not look up. You enter the scriptorium, where the walls are lined with shelves of vellum and bound volumes. The room is dim but alive, the scent of parchment sharp in your nose. In one corner, a monk leans over a manuscript, his quill, scratching softly, copying a passage from the Ars Moriendi, the art of dying. You read it over his shoulder. Let thy soul be always prepared, as though the angel of death stands at thy threshold. A skull sits beside him on the desk, not for decoration, but for memory. You pass another cell, where a younger brother sits cross-legged before a painting in progress. On his panel, a man lies stretched in bed, mouth agape, while demons tug at his limbs and angels hold back the dark. The image is not grotesque, it is intimate, an inner war at the hour of death. You pause. The young monk does not speak, but his hand does not tremble. He has seen death. He paints from truth. Later, in the chapel, the monks chant the dies ira, day of wrath. The sound is low and heavy, their voices braided together like old rope. You listen from the back, where a wooden bench creaks under your weight. The Latin flows through the arches, each word a footstep on the path toward judgment. They do not sing for the living, they sing for the soul. The stained glass window above the altar shows Saint Michael weighing hearts on a golden scale. On one side, a soul like a flame. On the other, sins piled high, pride, envy, greed. You stare at the balance. You wonder where your own weight would fall. After the service, you follow an elder monk into the ossuary beneath the chapel. It smells of earth and wax, of stone that has known grief. He carries a lamp and walks with the care of one who understands each step. We keep them here, he says softly. Those who died before confession, those who died too far from home. We pray for them, still. Every name, every night. The bones are stacked carefully, clean and aligned. Skulls facing outward, hollow eyes forever fixed on nothing. He kneels before them and begins to pray. You do not understand all the words, but you feel them. They press against your ribs, like breath held too long. He tells you of purgatory, a place of fire and cleansing, not punishment, but purification. To die unshriven, he says, is to be left unfinished. The soul wanders, it waits, but mercy can still reach. You listen, not because you fear, but because something in you recognizes the longing, the need for absolution, not just from others, but from the self. He shows you a book of visions, saints who saw hell in dreams, where the damned walked through flames, their sins carved into their flesh. One figure bears a tongue of iron for lies spoken. Another, hands bound in chains of gold, for wealth hoarded. It is brutal, and yet the monk speaks with gentleness. These are not to frighten, he murmurs. They are to remind, to prepare, so that when the hour comes, the soul is not surprised. You return to the chapel before dusk. The air has cooled, and the last light filters through the colored glass like wine. A new monk lies on a pallet before the altar, eyes closed, chest rising slow. He is not dead, but near. The others gather beside him, singing the litany of saints. His hands are clasped over a wooden cross. His lips move faintly. You kneel beside him. His breath rattles like leaves in wind. A tear slips from his eye, but his face is calm. A novice reads aloud from Scripture, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And suddenly you understand, this is not a moment of terror. It is a passage, a crossing, a door, opened not in darkness, but in hope. The monk exhales, once softly. Then no more, no weeping, no cries. Just the stillness of a life lived in preparation. The bell above tolls once, not for the village, but for heaven, and beneath its echo you rise. The frost is thin this morning, veiling the village fields like lace drawn over the skin of the world. A light wind stirs the last leaves from the elder trees, and the crows have quieted, as if they too remember what day this is. You walk slowly toward the chapel, candle in hand, guided not by urgency, but by custom, by rhythm, by something older than you. It is All Souls' Day inside the chapel. The air is already thick with the scent of incense and melted tallow. Dozens of candles flicker in the dark, each one lit for a soul long gone. Their flames tremble in the draught, casting long shadows against the stone, making the saints in the stained glass windows seem to breathe. Father Aldwin kneels before the altar, robes heavy with ash, murmuring names into the chilled morning, one after another, some aloud, some only in his mind. You kneel beside a row of others, children, widows, old men with hands like knots of oak, each with their own name to remember. The names are not spoken in unison. They ripple through the chapel like wind across tall grass. This is not a single grief, but a tapestry. After the service, the people begin to walk. Out into the graveyard they go, candles carried in rough-spun scarves, tucked beneath cloaks, guarded like embers from a fading hearth. You follow them, your breath rising in clouds, your boots crunching softly on frostbitten grass. The graves await. The path curves gently around the chapel, and there in the hush between sky and soil, the remembrance begins. Candles are placed on stones, tucked into hollows, nestled into the cups of old hands carved in weathered relief. Some graves bear no names, but someone still kneels there, still remembers. A child walks beside you with a lantern made of oiled parchment and birchwood hoops. His mother guides his hand as he places it at the base of a crooked cross. For her sister, she whispers, "Gone in spring, before the barley grew." The boy nods, solemn, understanding not fully, but enough. You pause before a grave of your own. The name is faded, the dates long erased by rain and time. But you know, you remember. You light your candle, cupping your hand around the flame until it holds. The warmth does not reach your fingers, but it does reach something deeper. Elsewhere, children scatter soul cakes beside the stones, crumbling rounds of bread left as offerings for the hungry dead, they say, for those not yet full with prayer. Some cakes are pressed with crosses, others with names. None go uneaten. Whether by birds or by spirits, none are wasted. The priest moves among the graves, his censer swinging in slow arcs. Smoke curls through the air like ancient breath. He whispers blessings in Latin, stopping at each stone as though greeting an old friend. You follow him for a while, his words a soft rhythm. Et lux perpetua lucite eyes, may perpetual light shine upon them later. The village gathers near the great yew at the far end of the cemetery, a tree older than memory, its roots tangled deep into the graves. Beneath its limbs, the names of the newly dead are spoken aloud. A list is read. The tone is not mournful, but steady, like oars dipping into dark water. Each name is followed by a pause, and then a single bell chime, one breath, one ring. Then, the next dot you see tears. You see smiles, too. Someone laughs softly at the memory of a grandfather who once mistook soot for salt. Another nods at the mention of a child who loved geese. Grief and joy live side by side today, as they always have. By midday, the sun has climbed high enough to silver the frost. Candles drip into pools. A robin flits among the graves, pecking at crumbs. And still the people stay. No one rushes. The dead are not hurried. Neither, today, are the living. You walk back with Father Aldwin as the light begins to fade. He speaks of the calendar, how each season carries its own burden of remembrance. Candlemas for mothers lost in childbirth, rogation days for the drowned and the missing, Michaelmas for those who died in war. Death does not belong to one day, he says. It belongs to the whole wheel. Inside the chapel, the candles are relit. A choir of novices begins a chant, voices young and trembling but pure. The sound swells. In the vaulted space, rising like incense, lingering like smoke. You sit in the back pew and close your eyes. In the darkness behind your lids, you see the names you've lost, the faces half remembered. You feel their presence not as ghosts, but as warmth, as footsteps still echoing behind you. The day will end soon. The flames will die. But the memory, the naming, the rhythm of mourning continues. The wheel turns, the bell waits, and tomorrow, as always, will come. Night falls slowly in winter. It does not descend, but seeps into corners, into hearthstones, into the hollow between ribs. By the time the last candle in the chapel gutters out, the stars are already sharp and watchful overhead. The graveyard, a tangle of stone and earth behind the church wall, lies quiet beneath the weight of frost, but not empty. You step through the lick gate with careful breath, your cloak drawn tight and your boots muffled by moss and frostbit grass. The moon is thin, a slip of silver hanging low in the sky. A dog barks far off in the hills, then falls silent. The hour is late. The village sleeps, but one figure is already here. She kneels by a small wooden cross near the edge of the cemetery, a place where the trees lean and the soil runs thinner. Her head is bowed and her breath curls faintly in the air. You approach slowly, not wishing to startle her. She does not look up. You recognize her then, the woman who lost her daughter in the harvest season. The girl with golden braids who used to chase geese through the churchyard, laughing like wind chimes. The mother brings no offering, no candle, only song. It's a lullaby, half spoken and half sung, the melody winding through the stones like fog. Her voice trembles at the edges, but the tune is steady, as if singing might bridge the distance between the living and the dead. You do not speak, you do not move, you simply listen. Around her, the graves are dressed in moonlight. Stones lean like sleepers, some bearing carvings to warn to read, others still sharp and proud. You pass a name you remember from a feast day sermon, another from a burial last summer. The graveyard is not a place of fear, not here. It is a memory garden, wild, quiet, tended only by time. The woman finishes her lullaby and sits back, her fingers brushing the top of the cross. You hear her whisper, "Sleep warm, my bird," then silence again. She does not leave. You take a place nearby, beside a stone cracked clean down the center. You feel no chill, only the weight of the world holding its breath. An owl calls softly from the treetops. Frost glitters on the grass like scattered pearls. The woman hums again, softer now. It is not a performance. It is not even grief. It is love, echoing. You think of all who have come here in the hours when others sleep. The old man who visits his wife each fortnight. The boy who leaves breadcrumbs at his brother's stone. The apprentice who lights a candle not for a family member, but for the master who once showed him kindness. Their feet wear faint paths in the grass, silent pilgrimages to places no longer marked on any map but the heart. The woman beside you places a small object at the base of the cross, a ribbon, faded and frayed. It once bound the child's braid. You know this without asking. It is not much, and yet it is everything. A soft wind stirs the yew branches overhead. The graves seem to shift, just slightly, as if listening. Somewhere far across the fields, a fox cries once, then is gone. The woman stands slowly, joints stiff with cold. She does not brush the frost from her knees. She does not look at you, but she nods, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. You understand. There are no words for this hour. Only presence. She disappears into the dark. The hush of her steps already swallowed by frost. You remain. The sky deepens, and the stars burn colder. Around you, the graveyard sleeps, and yet something remains awake. Memory, perhaps, or love, or that other silence, the kind that waits and watches and keeps. You rise at last, your breath a silver trail before you. As you pass each grave, you bow your head once, as if to say, I remember. Even if you do not know the names, the act matters, the gesture matters. For in this place, forgetting is the truest death. At the gate. You pause, behind you. The graveyard holds its vigil, not of bells, not of fire, but of quiet, of lullabies, of ribbons left behind. Morning breaks through the haze, like breath through frost. Pale shafts of sunlight filter through the monastery's narrow windows, falling upon stone floors scrubbed smooth by centuries of sandals and silence. Today, you travel beyond your village to a place where the dead do not lie quietly in the soil, but instead dwell above it, encased in gold, glass, and reverence. The cathedral at St. Aldhelm's rises above the valley like a ship caught mid-prayer, its spires catching the sun, its bells not tolling death today, but veneration. Pilgrims gather at the base of the steps, some barefoot despite the cold, others draped in cloaks sewn with patches from towns you've never seen. They come for healing, for miracles, for the brush of bone against belief. You join them inside. The air is thick with incense, not the kind that comforts, but the kind that overwhelms, rich with clove and myrrh and longing. A line coils through the nave, winding past arches and statues toward the great reliquary at the apse. There, encased in crystal and gilded oak, lie the relics of Saint Bertrada, her skull crowned with silver filigree, her finger bones strung like pearls in a sunlit display. You've heard stories of her, a nun who fed the poor during the famine of 1187, who died during the fast and was later found incorrupt beneath the altar steps. Her flesh is long gone now, but the legend remains, and with it the power of her bones. A woman behind you mutters prayers under her breath, each word a thread in a tapestry of desperation. Her son limps beside her, pale and wheezing. Ahead, a blind man clutches a staff carved with the names of other saints. A farmer lays a pouch of grain at the altar, not for the living, but for the intercession of the dead. You move forward slowly. Each step echoes. Each breath smells of wax and wood smoke. At last, you stand before her. Saint Bertrada's skull rests on a cushion of velvet, her jaw slack in a half-smile, her eye sockets dark as dusk. Yet she does not frighten you. The bones are polished, revered, treated not as remains, but as relics, fragments of sanctity. A monk places a hand on your shoulder. Touch, if you wish, he says softly. The saint answers all who come with honest hearts. You raise your hand, pressing your fingers against the glass. It is cold, as if the centuries themselves still cling to it. You close your eyes and think not of miracles, but of memory, of those you've buried, of names whispered over cold stones, of the mother who sang in the graveyard. When you open your eyes, nothing has changed, and yet something has. The monk offers you a sliver of wax, blessed from the vigil candles burning beside the relic. For the journey home, he says, a reminder that she watches. Later, you watch a procession exit the cathedral, monks swinging censers, children scattering herbs, pilgrims weeping not from grief, but release. The relic is carried high, wrapped in linens, followed by songs that rise to the rafters and slip out into the sky. You sit on a bench beside the cloister garden, where frost rims the rosemary and the last roses cling to brittle stems. A boy joins. You know, older than 12, his feet wrapped in rags, his face thin but bright. He clutches a parchment pressed with St. Bertrada's seal. "She healed my sister," he says, unprompted. "Last year, fever gone in a night." He doesn't say it boastfully, just truthfully. Then he adds, "But even if she hadn't, we'd still come." You ask why. He looks at the sky. Because she listens. You stay a little longer, watching the pilgrims return to their carts and donkeys, their voices quiet, their steps lighter. Not all received miracles, not all were healed, but they were seen, and in a world where death comes often and quietly, to be seen is its own kind of grace. Before you leave, you pass the reliquary once more. A candle burns low beside the saint's skull, its flame trembling but unyielding. You whisper a name not yours, not today's, but one you almost forgot. A boy who died of the pox. A girl drowned in spring. The candle flickers once, and then steadies. You hear the chiseling before you see the craftsman, the rhythmic knock of mallet against stone, the slow grinding of metal against grit. The stonemason's workshop lies just beyond the churchyard wall, beneath a slope of frost-hardened grass and the long reach of a blackthorn tree. It smells of dust and damp limestone, of soot and sweat, and something fainter still, like old prayers sunk into the walls. Inside, sunlight slices through a broken shutter, falling in long strips across the mason's back as he leans over. His work, his hands are mottled with age, fingers curled like gnarled branches around the chisel. He does not look up. His eyes are fixed on the face of death. Before him lies a tomb, effigy, a nobleman, robed and crowned, hands clasped in eternal prayer. But beneath that stone likeness, carved into the slab's underside, lies something else entirely. A second body, naked, gaunt, ribs pushing through flesh, jaw open in silent scream. A cadaver tomb, life above, death below. You step closer. The mason does not stop his work. He wanted it this way, he mutters. Said he'd rather sleep beside truth than flattery. The chisel strikes again. A chip of stone flakes off, landing near your boot. You study the upper figure. It is dignified, serene, eyes closed, mouth curved in piety. But the second carving, the one hidden beneath, is raw and honest. Skin pulled taut over bone, worms crawling through hair. The fingers clutch nothing. The body, stripped of status, lies exposed. Reminds us, the mason says, finally glancing your way, that no one outruns it. Not kings, not beggars. He gestures to a stack of sketches beside him, drawings of other tombs, some with angels lifting souls skyward, others with grinning skeletons holding hourglasses and scythes. They come here for beauty, he adds, but they leave with truth. He picks up a finer tool now, etching veins into the hand of the cadaver. Each line careful, reverent. Some folk fear these, he murmurs. Think they're morbid. I think they're merciful. They make the end less sudden. You ask him how long it takes to carve one. He shrugs. A season, sometimes two. Depends on how honest the man wants to be. You wander through the rest of the workshop. On the far wall, a half-finished bas-relief depicts the dance of death, skeletons in tattered robes, leading a procession of the living toward a shadowed gate. A merchant clutches a coin purse, a child clings to a doll, a bishop holds a crozier, eyes wide. Death leads them all. The mason follows your gaze. The dance don't discriminate, he says, but it does invite. He shows you a manuscript, brought from the scriptorium. Illuminated pages bloom with images of decay, skulls crowned with thorns, saints pierced by arrows, the Virgin cradling Christ beneath a darkened sky. Yet each page shimmers with gold leaf, beauty wedded to mortality. It's not about fear, he explains. It's about memory. If you can look it in the eye, you'll remember how to live. You sit near the hearth in the corner, where a pot of pitch bubbles and a pile of slate markers waits to be etched. You pick one up. The back bears faint marks from a previous name, now scraped smooth. Someone else will be buried beneath it soon, outside. The bells ring once for vespers. The mason wipes his hands and covers the cadaver tomb with cloth. She'll keep until tomorrow, he says. She's not going anywhere. You walk out with him into the crisp twilight. Across the road, the churchyard glows with the last of the sun. You see the stones differently now, not as ends, but as art, as stories, as warnings carved in limestone. Before you leave, he presses something into your hand, a tiny carving of a skull, smoothed from scrap. For your pocket, he says, not to scare you, just to keep you remembering. You nod because remembering, truly remembering, is its own kind of salvation. The hearth crackles in the stillness, its flames casting gold across the cottage walls. Outside, the wind hums through the rafters, nudging shutters and lifting stray curls of smoke into the black night. You sit close to the fire, your cloak loosened, your boots steaming faintly from the melted frost. The air smells of woods, drying herbs, and old wool. Across from you, the woman stares into the flame as if it were a doorway. Her name is Enid. Her eyes are glassy with memory. It wasn't a dream, she says at last, her voice soft as the ash falling in the hearth. It was him, I swear it. You listen. He stood right there. Beside the bed, she continues. Same cloak, same smell of rain and soil. I could see the line of his jaw, the patch he always wore on that left elbow. He didn't speak, just smiled. She leans forward slightly. The fire painting flickers across her cheeks. Her fingers toy with a strand of her shawl, twisting, releasing. I woke before the rooster crowed, but it stayed with me. That warmth, that peace. You don't ask if she's certain. In these villages, people know the difference between dreams and visitations, between figments and echoes. Outside, snow begins to fall, slow, soft flakes spiraling like feathers from a broken pillow. The thatch creaks under its weight. Inside, the fire dances higher. Dreams, in this world, are more than wandering thoughts. They are visitations, messages, sometimes warnings. You've heard the stories. A man foresees his brother's death in a dream and wakes to a rider at the gate. A midwife is guided to a birth in the woods by her dead mother's voice. A child sees her grandmother's hand beckoning her from the stream, moments before the flood. Enid's dream is different, not urgent, not ominous, but thick with presence. With love, she rises and walks to the corner shelf, lifting a small wooden box with care. Inside are dried lavender stalks, a silver ring, a twist of linen stained with candle wax. She pulls out a scrap of cloth, embroidered with a single initial G. He gave me this, she says. The winter before he passed. I found it at the foot of the bed the morning after he came. You take it gently, feel the softness, the frayed edge. Whether it truly appeared or merely reappeared, you do not question. Some things live beyond the veil. She offers you tea, black, bitter, steeped with fennel. You drink in silence. I think he came to see if I was all right, she says, eyes glimmering. Maybe he wanted to be sure I was remembering him kindly. You nod, it makes sense. Even in death, people long to be known, to be carried gently in the hearts of those left behind. In the corner, a clock ticks slow and steady. The fire settles, casting longer shadows along the stone. Enid sits again, shoulders softened now. Not slumped, just quieter, peaceful. She speaks of other dreams. Her mother combing her hair beside a pond. A friend who died of fever standing beside a blooming apple tree. Each dream carries the shape of memory, not distorted, but made gentle. By time, you've had them too, haven't you? The dream where a hand touches yours, and you wake with the scent of old cologne lingering. The dream where a voice whispers your name just before dawn. The dream that holds you long after waking, not in fear, but in longing. In the monastery, they speak of dreams as spiritual thresholds, where the soul, freed from flesh in sleep, meets those who have already crossed. Some monks keep journals beside their beds, filled with visions, fragments, symbols too complex for waking minds. Others fast before sleep, hoping to invite a visitation. You recall one friar who dreamed of his sister's death 3 nights before. The letter arrived. He wept not with grief, but with gratitude that he had been allowed to say goodbye in the only way left to him. Back in Enid's cottage, the fire dwindles. She stirs the embers with a poker, adding a log that catches with a reluctant sigh. I hope he visits again, she murmurs. Even just for a moment. You tell her that you hope so, too. When you leave, the snow has thickened. The world outside is hushed, muffled beneath white. You make your way down the lane slowly, breath steaming, boots crunching with each step. You glance behind you once, just once, and though you see nothing, you feel it, the presence of someone long gone, walking beside you, just out of sight. The scriptorium is cold this morning, colder than the frost outside. The stones hold the night like bone holds memory, and the windows weep with condensation, misting the leaded panes. You rub your hands together, breath coiling in front of you like ink upon vellum. The smell of the room is sharp and quiet, old. Wax, damp parchment, soot, and a faint sweetness from the dried violets hung above the lintel dot. In the far corner, a novice bends over a table, his head bowed, his quill dancing in soft scratches across a piece of calfskin. His hands are thin, his robes too large for his frame, and his eyes, when he glances up, carry that distant, raw tenderness of youth in mourning. You step closer. He does not look up again. You see what he's writing. To my brother, lost. In the spring rains. It is not scripture, not a sermon, not even a record. It is a letter to the dead. This is a practice older than most remember. Rare now, but still sacred. A ritual performed, not with chant, but with ink. Words written not for the living, but for the unseen, for those carried in the chest like embers. You take a place beside him in silence, watching as the young monks. Quill moves line by line. Each stroke is steady, deliberate, as though his brother might read it. I hope your sleep is gentle. I hope the crows no longer frighten you. He stops to blot the ink, then dips the quill again. You recall stories of these letters, burned in hearths, buried beneath graves, tucked into crypt walls where no wind could reach. Some were written by grieving mothers, others by lovers whose hands no longer had flesh to hold. Even kings have knelt before tombs, with parchment shaking in their fists. The novice finishes his letter and sets it aside to dry. Then, quietly, he opens a small wooden box beside him. Inside are other letters, some recent, others yellowed with age, the edges curled like autumn leaves. He fingers them gently, as if touching skin. Then he adds his own, binding them all with a crimson ribbon. Do they reach them? He asks suddenly, eyes fixed on the bundle. You don't answer right away. Instead, you recall an anchoress who once said that the wind knows how to carry a name, that love spoken aloud or written never falls into silence, but into some hidden river of memory. Perhaps, you reply, they already knew what you'd say, but it still mattered to write it. He nods. Later, you watch as he lights a candle in the chapel and kneels by the small brazier near the altar. The letter shakes slightly in his hand, not from fear, but from feeling. He touches it to the flame. It catches quickly, curling at the edges, blackening until the words lift upward in smoke. He watches until the last ash settles, then bows his head. Behind him, the chapel windows glow with winter sun. The saints depicted there, Sebastian, Agnes, Thomas, seem to look down, not with judgment, but with the weary understanding of those who once grieved. You return to the scriptorium. On the novice's table lies a blank sheet of parchment, weighed down by a small stone. A quill rests beside it. You stare at it for a long time. Then, with slow fingers, you dip the quill in ink and begin. To the one I could not hold. The words come slowly, unevenly at first, but they come. You write not for response, but for release. You do not ask questions. You do not demand signs. You only write what your heart cannot carry in silence anymore. When the letter is finished, you fold it carefully, press it to your lips, and place it beside the others in the novice's box. No one speaks of it. No one must. The letters will remain for a time. Then they, too, will burn, or vanish, or be sealed behind stone where time will forget them, but love will not. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft as ash, quiet as breath, and somewhere perhaps a name stirs on the lips of a soul long gone, in a village not unlike your own. Across the river and through a stand of elder trees, a house waits in quiet preparation. It is large, but not proud. The shutters are latched against the season's wind, and the smoke from the chimney rises steadily, not out of comfort, but out of duty. Inside, a man lies dying, not suddenly, but gradually, as autumn turns to winter, as leaves give way to ice. His name is Master Edric, a merchant of wool and timber, a man who has counted coins all his life and now counts only breaths. You arrive not to mourn, but to witness. For here the death has not yet come, but it is near enough that the world leans in close. The household is quiet but alert. Servants pad through halls like drifting shadows. A priest sits by the fire, hands clasped, murmuring psalms beneath his breath. In the solar, the wife oversees the laying out of linens, fine pale cloth from Normandy, stitched with a pattern of lilies, not for bedding. For burial, the children grown now, and pale with worry, consult lists. One sees to the alms that will be distributed. Another organizes the candles to be burned. The youngest holds the prayer book close. whispering through its pages as if the words might build a bridge to the other side. You climb the stairs slowly and step into the death room. Edric lies beneath furs, his body thinner than you remember, but his eyes sharp. He sees you, he nods. There is no fear in him, only readiness. He has made his accounts. On the bedside table, a crucifix, a silver coin, and a beeswax candle, his soul's travelling pack. The coin is not for the grave, but for the poor. The candle, to burn beside him when the time comes. The crucifix, to hold at the hour of departure. He has chosen each with care. He gestures faintly, and his steward steps forward. Show him, Edric rasps. You are led to a small chamber nearby, where everything has been arranged. A simple shroud, a plank coffin lined with rosemary, a pouch of coins for the almoner, and letters sealed with red wax. One for the parish, one for the guild, one for a friend long estranged. His wife's hands have tied them all with linen cord. No detail has been overlooked. You ask if this is customary. The steward nods. For a man of means, yes, but also for a man of conscience. He prepares as one prepares for a voyage. Downstairs, the priest begins the litany of the saints. The household joins in, their voices soft, solemn. You hear Edric's name spoken aloud. Pray for him, they say. Pray for him, O Lord. The wind scratches at the window. The candle flickers. Later, Edric beckons you close. His voice is faint now, threadbare. I feared it once, he whispers. Now I fear not being ready more than the end itself. He grips the crucifix. Let the toll be paid. Let me cross. His wife kneels beside him, lips moving with his last prayer. She does not cry. Her tears have been shed already, in secret, in the long nights leading here. Now she holds only presence. The final breath comes just before matins. A hush falls. The priest closes Edric's eyes. The candle is lit. The coin is passed from hand to hand and placed at the chapel door for the poor. In silence, the steward opens the chest and removes the shroud. You help wrap the body. His face seems younger now. Below, the cook prepares a bowl of broth for the household. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the fields, a cart creaks slowly toward the graveyard. You hear a bell ring once, far off. The ferryman has been paid. The frost came early this morning, lacing the cloisters in white and casting delicate webs across the corners of stone windows. You move through the monastery in silence, your boots brushing brittle leaves and cold dust. The bell has not rung yet, but the brothers know. Brother Tomas is dying. You find him in his cell, a small dim chamber with a low wooden bed, a crucifix on the wall, and a narrow slit of light falling across his blanket. The air smells of beeswax and old linen. His hands lie folded on his chest, the fingers long and worn, darkened with ink and soot. You remember those hands, lifting the dying during the plague, washing the fevered brow of the abandoned. Now they are still. Beside him sits Brother Anselm, chanting softly from the Psalter. The words rise and fall like wind through pine. Another monk adds his voice from the doorway, and slowly the chant thickens, not with sorrow, but with reverence. They are not pleading, they are guiding. Tomas's breaths are shallow, his lips parted. His eyes, once fierce with mercy, flicker faintly. He does not speak, but he listens. You know he hears every word. You kneel beside the bed. The candle on the table trembles, casting long shadows across the rough stone walls. On the shelf, a small carved Madonna, 3 worn books, and a dried sprig of lavender, long forgotten but still fragrant. A young novice brings a cloth dipped in rose water and gently touches it to Tomas's lips. His face twitches the smallest motion as if memory stirred. Outside the window, snow begins to fall, light as breath. It gathers in the cloister walk, on the bare limbs of the apple trees, in the folds of statues worn smooth by prayer. The brothers begin the office of the dead. The Latin rolls through the corridor, echoing like a river beneath stone. Sancti Dei, occurrite, Angeli Domini, come to his aid, saints of God. Hasten to meet him, angels of the Lord. Thomas exhales. It is not a gasp. It is not a rattle. It is a release. A long, soft breath that leaves the body like mist over morning fields. His hands relax. His brow smooths. His chest does not rise again. The candle still burns. No one weeps. Not yet. Brother Anselm closes Tomas's eyes. The novice kisses his hand. You step back, and in the quiet, feel a warmth that is not grief, but completion. Later, the monks wash the body in warm water and wrap him in his habit, the same robes he wore in service, now his final vestments. They bind his waist with the cord, tuck the rosary between his folded hands. On his chest, a wooden cross carved by another brother years before. You help lift him. His body is light. Not because of weakness, but because it carries no weight anymore. They carry him to the chapel. There is no grandeur, only chant, only candlelight, only snow falling past the windows in slow silence. The abbot places a sprig of rosemary near Tomas's head. You kneel beside the bier. Others follow. The chapel fills not with noise, but with breath. The space between one prayer and the next feels infinite. By evening, the grave is ready. The ground has been warmed by fire and covered in straw. He is lowered in. A single bell rings. A clod of earth falls. A voice whispers the final commendation. As you walk back through the cloister, you pause in his cell. The candle still burns. The air still smells faintly of lavender. On the wall, the crucifix watches over the room, unchanged. But the silence has deepened. It is not empty, it is full. The village looks different now, not because the houses have changed, nor the trees that line the frostbitten road, but because you are no longer the same. You walk with memory in your bones, and silence where noise once lived. You return not as a guest, but as someone seeking something long left behind. The chapel bell rings once, not for morning, not for mass, but for time itself. A sound that folds through the valley like an old blanket, worn thin but warm with use. You pause beneath the oak tree beside the lit gate, the same one that leaned toward you years ago when you watched your first funeral. You were a child then, small hands gripping your mother's cloak, eyes wide, not with fear, but with something heavier, wonder. You remember the procession, the cart, the shrouded body, the slow steps through the mud. You remember the singing and the stillness. You remember the moment the earth opened. Now, years later, you return, not as that child, but as the one who watched him. A new child stands at the edge of the graveyard. He clutches a sprig of winterberry, red and fragile. His father kneels beside a fresh mound of earth, smoothing the soil, muttering a prayer. The boy watches him with the same wide eyes. You recognize the posture, the breath held, the thousand unspoken questions. You step gently past him and enter the graveyard. It is unchanged, and yet it has grown. More stones now, more names, More markers leaning into the wind like weary shoulders. You pass graves you once knew, some now too worn to read, others freshly etched. You kneel beside one. The name is familiar, the date recent. A friend, perhaps, or someone once met at a feast, or in the field with shears and jokes and bread. You lay a hand on the stone. It is cold but solid. The child follows you. Quietly, no words. You glance back and smile. He doesn't speak, but he crouches beside a grave with tiny flowers pressed into its soil. You realize it is for a sibling, perhaps one he never met. Do they hear us? He asks. You pause and then nod. I think so. You do not explain how. You do not need to. The knowing sits between you, quiet and sure. The father finishes his prayer and joins the boy. He places a hand on his son's head, then turns to leave. The child stays a moment longer and then rises. He walks beside you as you move toward the chapel, his boots leaving narrow tracks in the hoarfrost dot inside. The chapel is warmer than it should be. Candles burn along the ledge. Someone has left a basket of soul cakes near the altar, a custom nearly faded, but not yet gone. You take one and hand another to the boy. He breaks his in half, placing one piece beside a candle. For her, he whispers. You both sit in the back pew. The chapel breathes with silence, not empty, but full of every name spoken here, every tear dried, every hand held. You glance at the stained glass. The same saints, the same stories, but your eyes linger on the angel with the trumpet, carved into the corner panel, the one you feared as a child. Now he seems less like a warning and more like a promise. The boy shifts beside you, I think. I'll come here again, he says, even when no one tells me to. You nod. That is how it begins. That is how memory is passed. You leave him at the chapel door. He turns once to wave, then disappears down the path you once walked. And now, at last, you understand what it means to be the watcher, to carry names like candles, to speak when others forget, to be the one who stays. The chapel lies beyond the hills, nestled in the shadow of a crumbling fortress and hidden behind a copse of ancient ash trees. Its stones are darker than most, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, and its doorway is low, as if the building itself has learnt to bow. You arrive just before dusk, the sky brushed with bruised light and the smell of cold earth rising. From the fields, the bell does not ring here. Not anymore. You enter in silence. The air is colder inside, still and dry. Dust floats like ash through the fading light. And then you see them, not saints in stained glass, not relics in golden boxes, but bones. Every wall is dressed in them. Skulls lined in tidy rows, their sockets empty yet unblinking. Femurs stacked like cordwood, tibias framed in arches. The ceiling is a mosaic of scapulae and vertebrae, arranged in patterns that mimic stars and flowers. In the center of the room, above the altar, hangs a great chandelier, made entirely of human bones. You stand very still. There is no horror here, only reverence. A monk approaches, robes trailing like parchment along the stone floor. His face is soft, lined with years, his eyes as calm as moonlight on a still pond. He speaks gently. They were buried first, he says, then brought here. Their graves gave way to others, but they were not forgotten. You follow him as he walks slowly between the walls, fingers brushing the worn surface of a skull. Each has a name, he continues, though time has taken most. Still, they remain part of us, of this place, of God's body. He pauses. At a niche where bones form the shape of a cross. Beneath it lies a plaque. We were what you are. You will be what we are. You read it twice. The monk leads you to a small side chapel, quieter still, where a single candle burns beneath a pile of bones arranged like a chalice. A novice kneels there, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. He does not look up. The bones glow amber in the candlelight, their edges softened by shadow. You sit beside him, here. In this place of remains, the dead are not mourned. They are honored, not hidden away in boxes or beneath earth, but lifted into light. They become structure, sanctuary, symbol. They chose this, the monk says. Some asked to rest here, to remain part of the sacred space, to remind the living. You ask what? They remind us of Dot. He does not answer, but you feel it. The truth is in the silence between bones, the stillness that outlasts breath. You trace the rim of a skull with your eyes, the smooth arc, the seam like a riverbed. You wonder who they were, a baker, a child, a soldier who died with no name but a prayer. You realize they are not so different from you. Bones waiting. Beneath skin, the monk kneels. He begins a litany for the unnamed. One by one, the monks join him, their voices rising slowly, like mist through beams of dust. The names are not real, not anymore, but the rhythm matters, the remembering matters. You close your eyes, and in that moment, you feel the room not as a tomb, but as a body, a living memory made of ash and silence and prayer. You do not leave right away. You sit long after the voices fade, letting the bones speak in their own way, not with language, but with presence, with stillness, with patience. When you step outside, the wind has stilled, the stars have come out, and behind you the chapel of bones stands quiet and strong, a testament carved not in marble, but in memory. The snow has melted from the hills. The EUs that stand watch over the graveyard have begun to shake off their white coats, their needles glistening with meltwater in the soft light of afternoon. You walk alone now, the sky above you pale and wide, the wind gentle and without edge. There is no bell today, no procession, no weeping, only silence. You pass the edge of the village where the plague once choked the streets, and the chapel steps bore the weight of too many bodies. The doors are open now. Children run past them, barefoot and shrieking with laughter. A woman hangs linens in the sun. Smoke from cooking fires curls lazily skyward. Life has returned. It always does. And yet, beneath the chatter of birds and the creak of shutters, you hear it. The silence, not absence, not void, but something deeper. The silence left by those who will not return. A chair that stays empty at the hearth. A lullaby never finished. A name no longer spoken aloud. You step off the path and follow the edge of the old field, past the bramble hedge and the stone wall slick with moss. The graves here are older, some with stones leaning like tired shoulders, others with no stones at all, just sunken earth and faded memories. You pause at one such mound, indistinct and unnamed. Grass grows wild over it. A single violet blooms at the edge. You kneel, not because you know who lies here, but because someone should dot in your mind. You search for their name, not the one etched in stone, but the name that once was called over supper, whispered in love, shouted in play. You will never know it, but you speak anyway. I remember you, you say softly, even if I never knew you. The wind stirs. It is enough. You walk farther, toward the edge of the village, where the fields stretch wide and the trees are fewer. This place was once filled with tents, with carts heavy with the dying, with shovels carving into frostbitten soil. Now it is a meadow. Wildflowers have reclaimed what was lost. Lupins, daisies, Queen Anne's lace, delicate and defiant. A fox darts through the tall grass and vanishes. Here is the long silence, not cruel, not cold, but inevitable, and yet it is not empty. You hear bees. You see a pair of lovers walking hand in hand beneath the trees. You feel the hum of something ancient, something that remembers every footfall, every tear, every prayer mumbled into a borrowed shroud. This too is morning, not loud, not adorned in ritual, but deep and steady, like a river beneath soil. You reach the crest of the hill. Below you, the village breathes, roofs warm with sun, the chapel bell at rest, the fields pulsing with green. Behind you, the graveyard waits, quiet and patient. Before you, life unfurls. The silence remains, but now it feels like part of the song. You descend slowly, each step echoing against the stone beneath your feet. The stairwell curves like a ribcage, narrowing as you go. Moss glistens on the walls, and the air thickens, cool, still older than breath. There is no sound now but your own. No birdsong, no wind, only the hush of stone and the beat of your heart. You carry a candle. The crypt opens before you like a sigh. Arched ceilings hover overhead like the backs of sleeping giants, and the walls stretch with alcoves, each one holding something once sacred. The bones of monks, the ashes of villagers, the silent remains of centuries. Names carved in Latin, some half-worn, some vanished. The candle in your hand casts long shadows, and each flicker reveals something different. A jawbone, a rosary left on a ledge, a faded ribbon tucked into a crack in the wall. Offerings, remnants, proof that the living still return. You kneel before one of the tombs, no larger than a cradle. The inscription is barely legible, but someone, not long ago, left a sprig of rosemary there, still green, still fragrant. You light your candle from the one left burning before you. Its wax has pooled, hardened, cracked. The flame passes gently between them, a continuity, a prayer not for salvation, but for memory. And then you sit for a long time. You do not pray aloud, you do not weep, you simply stay, breathing in the scent of earth and wax and time, listening to the heartbeat of a place that remembers everyone it has held. You are not alone. You feel it, suddenly, deeply, not as a chill or a sound, but as presence. The weight of all those who once lived, who once knelt like you, who once whispered names into the dark and hoped they were heard. You are one of them now. You have walked their path. Above, the chapel bell begins to ring, not for morning, not for mass, but because it is evening, because the sun is setting, because time, as always, continues. You rise, you leave your candle behind, its light flickering softly in the crypt's breath. As you climb the steps back toward the chapel, the air grows warmer. The scent of bread wafts in through the stone. Someone is baking again. Children laugh in the distance. A gate creaks. A dog barks once, then quiets. At the chapel door, you pause. You look back once. The crypt lies below, unchanged. But you are changed. You have carried the dead. You have walked beside them. You have listened to their silence and lit their names. And now you carry them forward into the light, into tomorrow, into breath as the last echoes fade in the stone of the crypt. I hope this journey has lit something soft and steady in your soul. Subscribe if you'd like to walk again through the forgotten chambers of the past. The dead are never truly silent, not while we remember as the last candle gutters in this ancient chapel of memory. I thank you for walking these shadowed paths. If this story left a mark on your heart, subscribe and return when you're ready to remember again. The past is never gone. It is simply waiting for someone to listen. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Could you have mourned with such grace or survived such loss? Which image lingered in your mind? The bone-lined chapel, the dream of the dead, or the silent vigil at midnight?